Something that happened recently with Dragon Quest VII Reimagined might be the reason why Square Enix is taking so long for games like Dragon Quest XII in addition to Kingdom Hearts 4. Now, I don't think this is the sole reason why that we're going to go over. We're going to get into a number of different things, but I do think that it's a little bit of a catalyst if you look at how risky games are to make, what you need to do in today's games, and just how the market is shaping up, especially in Japan, where games like Dragon Quest are the most popular and have a wide reach when it comes to when these games release and how they need to do. Kingdom Hearts as well. So we're going to break down all of that in today's video. So let's talk about it. Why do we get a clue of why it's taking so long for Dragon Quest XII to come out because of Dragon Quest VII Reimagined? Well, you can look at the most recent Famitsu sales charts. Once again, Dragon Quest is massive in Japan. It's really the catalyst. It's really the driver for how they do things. Now, yes, they do have more of a worldwide release and a worldwide base now at this point compared to before in the past with Dragon Quest, but they still look at what's happening with Dragon Quest, where it's selling, and what's going down to kind of see what they need to do for future games. And in the latest Famitsu sales charts for Japan that tracks retail only, no digital sales, some very interesting bits of information can be extracted from this. Now, the sales numbers are from February 2nd, 2026 to February 8th, 2026. Dragon Quest VII Reimagined went on sale, I think about February 5th or so. There was some early bonuses, but for the most part, it was a few days of sales numbers. Now, if you look at the spread across all different platforms, the game sold incredible 456,552 retail units sold, not including digital, where it's number one on the eShop charts, or number two. It was number one for a bit, then it went to number 2 or number 3, and then it's also top in the Japanese eShop charts as well for the Nintendo Switch 2 and even the Nintendo Switch 1, gaining some traction there. But I think that the split amongst the systems is very interesting because while it did sell the best on the Nintendo Switch 1 with 177,653 units, it actually sold second best on the Nintendo Switch 2 with 160,101 units. That is above the 118,798 units. Now, the thing about this is that between those three systems, the Nintendo Switch 2 by far has the lower install base. Although it's fastly gaining on the PlayStation 5, the fact that it was able to sell above the PS5 with its install base and not too far away from the Nintendo Switch 1, which is the best selling system of all time in Japan, shows you the dynamic shift that Square Enix absolutely sees with this platform and what they need to do to have success long term. You gotta kind of see and project how things are gonna go before you actually do them. Otherwise, you could be left behind by the time that the game actually comes out. So I think that this is very valuable information and gives us a bit more insight on what's happening. And I think that Square Enix called this. This is the reason why they had to really formulate and do things differently, which we are going to talk about in just a bit. But before we keep on going here, because we got a lot more information to go over, please make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and click that notification bell if you're enjoying this type of Nintendo Switch 2 and RPG content. Okay, let's get back into it here, because I think that with this sales breakdown, you're seeing that a lot of money, millions of dollars, is on the line when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2 and making sure that you support the system. If you can get your games out day and date, you see the result here, especially with the RPG in Japan. Now, yes, Dragon Quest is incredibly popular. Other series aren't going to sell as well as Dragon Quest, but the ratio of sales that we're seeing for day and date games on the Nintendo Switch 2, especially in Japan, are very high, and it's really important for a lot of these developers. And I think that's the reason why, because if you look at what's happening with Dragon Quest VII Reimagined, and you could only guess how much more money and how the stakes are so much higher for Dragon Quest XII, they need to make sure that they make a ton of money on this game. So I feel that one of the reasons why Dragon Quest is taking so long is because they are preparing a big day and date Nintendo Switch 2 version of the game, and they want to make sure when they finally reveal this game that it is perfect in the sense of when they reveal it, the proximity to the release of the game, the footage for the Nintendo Switch 2 version, because this is going to be a massive event. I'm not sure if there's even going to be a Nintendo Switch 1 version of Dragon Quest 12. I don't think there will be. I think it's going to be Xbox, PlayStation, PC, and Nintendo Switch 2, but we'll see on that. So the ratio of the Nintendo Switch 2 sales versus the other platforms and how well that it did, that is a big determining factor in my opinion, at least. Square Enix's multi-platform business plan is huge. I think that they're taking into account that they have to make sure that they have the Nintendo Switch 2 there. It's a perfect type of system for Dragon Quest 12. And I think that Dragon Quest 12 was probably in development well before Square Enix got a dev kit. I think that they actually shifted over to main production before the dev kits were even in circulation, considering how many years ago they talked about Dragon Quest and how Mr. Yuji Horii has said, hey, look, we're still developing it. It's still happening. But that was well before dev kits were even there. So I do think that they're trying to make sure that they catch up, because the one thing that they cannot have a repeat of, for those who missed it or if you forgot what happened, back in 2017, Dragon Quest 11, that game was launching and it didn't launch on the Nintendo Switch 1 at the same time. Despite the Switch 1 being out, it didn't launch at the same time as the 3DS and the PlayStation 4 versions of the game. And that caused a 2-year delay, and they ultimately ended up just essentially making a new version of the game. They didn't port the PlayStation 4 version of the game. They built it from scratch within the Unreal Engine 4 for the Nintendo Switch 1, which caused some very interesting side effects and ripples down the line. But I do think that they probably lost out on quite a bit of money not having it back in 2017, because there needed to be some Unreal Engine 4 updates, and the Switch 1 was a newer platform, so there were just some problems. So it took 2 more years in order to get it. Now, it's funny because when they made that version, the graphics obviously aren't going to be as good as PlayStation 4, but they had a bunch of enhancements to the game. And ultimately, when the game was re-released on Xbox and PlayStation, it looks a little bit worse because they used the Nintendo Switch 1 code for the re-release on Xbox and PlayStation. So the PS4 version, graphically speaking, outside of PC, is probably the best looking version of the game, but it has the MIDI music and none of the other quality of life features and improvements and updates, so it's nowhere near as good as the Dragon Quest XI-S Echoes of an Elusive Age version of the game, but it was just interesting. So I think that they're trying to avoid at all costs a repeat of that situation, because that was not a good situation for Square Enix. Then ultimately ended up working out. Dragon Quest XI sold incredible. It sold great on the Nintendo Switch 1. Across the world, people love Dragon Quest XI. I think it did really good, and they made their money on 3DS in Japan, at least. They never got a worldwide release for the 3DS version of Dragon Quest XI, but I think that they want to make sure that they have everything, all systems go, for all platforms, including the Nintendo Switch 2, right there at launch, to avoid the situation. And who knows what type of engine they're using and what they're doing. If they're using Unreal Engine 5 for this game, so if they're making the step above, because Dragon Quest XI, that used Unreal Engine 4, then they absolutely need to make sure that they take their time to really optimize and everything, because Unreal Engine 5 has had some issues across all platforms, and especially on the Nintendo Switch 2. So I do think that that's something that they really need to make sure that they get and lock down. Now, and I also think it's taken a lot of time because there's going to be a ton of new mechanics. There's a lot of testing and work to do. Sometimes people trivialize these Dragon Quest games. It's just a turn-based RPG with the same mechanics that we've been having for decades now, and it's just not that. There's so many different things, from like hit animations to functioning to bugs and glitches to testing to balancing to endgame content to voice work. It's just like it never ends when you're making a game. So I think that the vast amounts of new content, the vast amounts of different things that they're doing with this game, because they did say that they wanted to change it up a bit. I don't think it's going to play exactly like traditional Dragon Quest. I don't think it's going to play like Dragon Quest 11. I think there's going to be new mechanics and new things in here. So I feel that that's one of the reasons why, along with a lot of the other stuff that I talked about here, why it's taking a bit longer than people would expect. And I think that the biggest thing here that I feel is probably like the most important is the initial reveal. They've already had a CG kind of just like title trailer, and that's fine, kind of giving you the vibe and maybe the tone of what this game could be. But I think that the right timing and rollout when it comes to marketing is just as important. That is so important to kind of start off on a good foot. there's so many more games, there's so many more RPGs, there's so many more things that are just out there for people's attention. If you don't do it right, even if you have established developers, IPs and things, it can turn out really bad for you. So I do think that the right timing is what they're working on as well, to make sure that they have everything ready. And there's probably no better timing for a game like this, especially with what they're trying to do, than having it at a Nintendo Direct. Now, it could not be. There's been Dragon Quest reveals at Nintendo Directs. I think the first time that we even saw Dragon Quest VII Reimagined was at a Nintendo Direct, and that was a huge boost for the game. So I do think that they're trying to line things up with a Nintendo Direct and getting that out. So getting the logistics of collaborating with Nintendo, getting everything set for this game, getting all the voice work done, English and Japanese, getting all of the mechanics built in, making sure that it's polished, that there's no bugs, glitches, the graphics look good, the engine optimizations, there's just so much, and I think that it's kind of all piling up here. But a Nintendo Direct would be awesome. And I think that the question though, the big question for many of you guys that are probably asking, okay, that's great, Nintendo Direct, sure, there's been Dragon Quest games at Nintendo Directs all the time, but when will that be? Will that be a reveal this year? Could that be a September type of Nintendo Direct? Absolutely. That is on the table for a September reveal for Dragon Quest XII at a Nintendo Direct. I think that that would be really good. And obviously, you look at the sales numbers, right? And I think this is where it's kind of all like taking a lot of my thought process, because it's a business, so they drive things based off of business. And if you're looking at the Nintendo Switch 2 in Japan, once again, with the Dragon Quest sales here for the last week, Switch 2 sold 65,807 units. This is usually the really slow time period of the year after the holidays and the explosion of the sales. Things slow down considerably, and the Nintendo Switch 2 can still put up 65,000 units plus, being pretty much sellouts or near sellouts in a lot of stores in Japan. So Square Enix is absolutely looking at all of that. Where are they going to get the biggest impact, the biggest punch, the best marketing bit for this game? And it would have to be revealed for the Nintendo Switch 2 at a Nintendo Direct, and that would be explosive for what they can do in Japan and of course worldwide. I think obviously people are going to want to play it on PlayStation or PC, and it's going to do fine on other platforms, but I think that Switch 2 is probably going to be a driving platform for them in lots of places of the world, despite it being a much lower install base than other platforms. But I think that in Japan, I think it's going to dominate from the very beginning because of what we're seeing with the Japanese sales and because of what we're seeing with Dragon Quest VII Reimagined. That 160,000 units, despite only having about 4.3 million install base in Japan, that is an incredible ratio compared to the 7 million or so with the PlayStation 5 and the 118,000 units plus, and the 35 million plus with the Nintendo Switch 1 and the 77,000 units. Once again, this does not include digital sales. I also think it says another thing. Key cards are interesting because people said that nobody wants to buy these, and Dragon Quest VII Reimagined is absolutely a key card game with no upgrade from the Nintendo Switch 1, which I don't know what Square Enix is doing there, because they've done free upgrades before, even with Dragon Quest itself, with Dragon Quest 3, the HD 2D remake. Like, you can get a free update there with the Switch 1 cartridge. So I don't know what's going on there, but at the same time, it is a key card and people did buy it that much. So I really think key cards come down to this when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2, is that if it's a game that people really want, they'll either just go digital like they've been doing, or they'll pick it up on a key card if they want to take advantage of the Nintendo Switch 2 and what it does. So how Square Enix actually puts together this reveal of Dragon Quest XII, and if it's going to be at a Nintendo Direct, I don't think time is running out for it, but I do think that they are in the final stages to where they really need to put something together, just because they've been re-releasing multiple Dragon Quest games, and I don't think that they have many left when it comes to certain Dragon Quest stuff, or at least anything that's going to be ready to go anytime soon. I do think that after Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D remake, Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D remake, in addition to Dragon Quest 7 Reimagined, the time is kind of coming up, and they are putting something together to be able to show for the next big major Dragon Quest game. Now, Yuji Horii has talked multiple times saying it's coming at this point. They can't talk about it. That usually means that they are getting ready a big presentation that can be done in just a variety of ways. But I felt that I wanted to discuss the potential because I do think that it is a big potential that it does show up at a Nintendo Direct and we really get that first Dragon Quest 12 type of feel. You've got to get this right, and because of all the reasons that I listed, I think that Nintendo Switch 2 with PlayStation, Xbox, PC, whatever else they want to do would probably be the best bet. But to have the biggest impact, especially in Japan with the hype and everything with this game, I think that a Nintendo Direct is probably the best course of action to see. And once again, they have used Nintendo Directs multiple times for various different Square Enix projects, but especially for Dragon Quest titles. So we'll see if that happens. But that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 and RPG content right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.